In New York, in one of the city's iconic neighborhoods, where skyscrapers reflected the fading orange glow of the evening sun, there lived a family that everyone envied. Matthew and Jennifer Reynolds, along with their 3 children, Ethan, Lily, and Noah, seemed to have it all. Their home was immaculate, decorated with warm tones, family photos, and laughter that echoed through its hallways. On social media, they were the picture of perfection. Family vacations, birthday parties, cozy evenings by the fireplace. Friends and neighbors admired them, wishing for lives that mirrored this facade of happiness. Matthew, a man in his late 30s, was a successful entrepreneur, calm and composed, with a presence that inspired trust. Jennifer, graceful and stunning, balanced her career and motherhood effortlessly. Her long, dark hair framed a face that could captivate anyone, and her eyes, though kind, now hid a quiet yearning, a void she hadn't realized existed until recently. Their children were the heart of the household. Ethan, 13, thoughtful and clever, often amazed his parents with his insights. Lily, 10, imaginative and sensitive, spent hours drawing and singing softly. Noah, 7, mischievous and energetic, kept the family on its toes. To outsiders, the Reynolds were flawless, their happiness a beacon of hope. But behind the smiles and the laughter, whispers of dissatisfaction and desire stirred. The quiet discontent in Jennifer, subtle yet growing, became impossible to ignore. She had begun noticing things differently, glances, gestures, and attention she had never sought but now found herself drawn toward. It began with a new neighbor, a young man named Alex, 35, who had recently moved into the building next door. He was charismatic, funny, and had a way of making everyone feel lighter around him. His humor and easy charm were infectious, and Jennifer, despite her life, found herself looking forward to the rare moments they met. Alex would occasionally drop by, bringing small gifts or sharing a casual joke. His laughter was warm, and his eyes seemed to see her, not just the mother, not just the wife, but the woman she had almost forgotten she was. At first, Jennifer dismissed it as harmless, a fleeting distraction. But as days passed, she found herself thinking of him more often. The allure wasn't just in his looks or humor, but in the attention and acknowledgement she felt deprived of in her marriage. Gradually, her focus shifted. The children noticed subtle changes, her distracted glances, the way she sometimes forgot to respond when they spoke, the moments when her smile felt forced. Matthew, perceptive but trusting, noticed too. He questioned her gently, "Jennifer, is everything all right?" She smiled and reassured him, masking the internal conflict growing inside her. Jennifer's interactions with Alex grew bolder, though carefully hidden from Matthew and the children. Private messages, lingering conversations, and secret meetings in places only they knew of. The excitement thrilled her, and the guilt gnawed at her simultaneously. Slowly, an emotional chasm opened between her and her family, the once inseparable bond with her children and husband now fragile and strained. Then Alex planted the seed. He whispered, carefully and convincingly, how Matthew's success and stability didn't make him the man she truly desired. He implied possibilities, the unthinkable, suggesting that Jennifer could take control of her own destiny. At first it was just talk, fantasies shared in hushed tones. But the more time passed, the more Jennifer's emotions entangled with his manipulations. One rainy evening, with the city slicked in neon reflections, the family gathered for a casual dinner. The children were bright, lively, unaware of the dark undercurrents around them. Matthew spoke of a work project, Ethan animatedly described his school assignment, Lily sang softly while Noah chattered endlessly. Jennifer sat among them, her smile practiced, yet her mind wandered. She thought of Alex, the thrill of their last meeting, the forbidden excitement that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. As the night deepened and the children went to bed, Jennifer's world shifted irreversibly. Alone with Matthew, the air thickened with tension. Words were exchanged, tense, calculated, filled with an unspoken finality. Jennifer had reached a decision, influenced by the promises Alex made, promises of love, freedom, and a new life. The act was swift, cold, and irreversible. In the dim light of the kitchen, Matthew's life ended, leaving a silence that roared louder than any sound. Jennifer stood over him, a storm of adrenaline, fear, and twisted exhilaration coursing through her. Outside, the rain masked any potential witnesses, and the night swallowed the act into shadows. She had committed the unthinkable, murder, justified in her mind by her longing and Alex's manipulations. The next morning, the neighborhood awoke to tragedy. Matthew Reynolds, husband and father, was dead. Jennifer played the grieving widow flawlessly. She comforted the children, shed tears on cue, and even allowed herself to be photographed by the press. To the world, she was a victim. Inside, she was a conspirator, concealing the truth with every ounce of her being. The police investigation began meticulously. Detectives noted inconsistencies, retraced the night's events, and questioned the family. At first, it seemed like a tragic accident. Yet, small details, the deleted messages, the subtle lies, hinted at a darker reality. The perfect image of the Reynolds family was cracking. Alex, meanwhile, distanced himself carefully, always ensuring that suspicion never fell on him. When investigators started connecting dots, he subtly shifted blame, leaving Jennifer exposed. In the quiet of her home, with the children slowly noticing her emotional withdrawal, Jennifer felt the crushing weight of betrayal, not from Matthew but from the man she believed loved her. Her internal guilt grew unbearable. The children, once inseparable from their mother, began sensing her guilt. Their eyes, innocent yet piercing, started reflecting confusion and mistrust. Jennifer's world was unraveling. Her secret, the betrayal, the murder, and now the realization that the man she trusted most outside her marriage had deceived her. Alone, remorseful, and haunted by her actions, she faced the consequences she had once believed she could control. This was only the beginning. The investigation would uncover every secret, every lie, and every manipulation. The Reynolds family, once admired and envied, was now a labyrinth of deceit, heartbreak, and consequences that would leave scars for years to come. The sun rose over New York, painting the city in hues of gold and gray, but the Reynolds home remained cloaked in a shadow that daylight could not penetrate. Inside, the walls seemed colder, the rooms quieter, yet the air was heavy with unspoken tension. Jennifer had mastered the art of the grieving widow, but grief, as she discovered, could never mask guilt entirely. Detectives assigned to Matthew's case approached the scene methodically. Detective Harper, a seasoned investigator with sharp instincts, noted the subtle inconsistencies in the house. The living room was immaculate, yet there were faint smudges on the kitchen floor, traces of hurried movements. No signs of forced entry. No immediate witnesses. On the surface, everything screamed tragedy, but Harper sensed something darker lurking beneath. Jennifer maintained her composure flawlessly during interviews. She recounted the evening as she had planned. Matthew had been working late, she had tucked the children in, and upon checking on him, she found him gone, or so she claimed. Her tears were convincing, her voice quivering just enough to suggest despair. But Harper wasn't easily deceived. Small discrepancies in her story nagged at him. The time she claimed to have checked the children, the placement of objects in the kitchen, the unexplained silence of the security cameras in certain frames. Meanwhile, the children began noticing subtle changes in their mother. Ethan, perceptive beyond his years, observed the way Jennifer avoided certain rooms or how her gaze would sometimes drift toward the window, as if waiting for someone. Lily, sensitive and intuitive, sensed a strange tension in the house that even she could not name. Noah, too young to understand fully, felt the absence of his father profoundly, but he also sensed the coldness that had replaced Jennifer's warmth. At the same time, Alex, the charming neighbor, continued to exert his subtle influence. He visited sporadically under the guise of concern, checking on Jennifer and the children. Each visit, each conversation, deepened her dependency on him, not just emotionally but psychologically. Alex never pressed too hard, always leaving just enough distance to make Jennifer crave his presence, making her feel both guilty and exhilarated simultaneously. As days passed, Jennifer's careful act began to fray at the edges. One evening, Harper returned to the house with forensic experts, and the meticulous examination revealed inconsistencies. Fingerprints that didn't belong to Matthew, unusual marks on furniture, faint traces of cleaning chemicals in the kitchen. almost as if someone had tried to erase evidence hastily. The pattern was subtle but deliberate, pointing toward the grim possibility that Matthew's death was no accident. Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine. She had counted on perfection. Her plan had relied on meticulous timing, careful deception, and Alex's manipulation. But now the walls seemed to be closing in. The police presence, the questioning, and the sudden awareness that she might have left a trace caused anxiety to spiral into panic. At night, when the children were asleep, Jennifer found herself pacing through the empty house. The silence was deafening. Memories of Matthew, once warm and comforting, now haunted her. She recalled his laughter, his reassuring words, the tender way he would brush Lily's hair or kneel to explain something to Noah. And beneath those memories lurked the twisted thought that she had extinguished the very presence that had defined her world. Guilt began to consume her. She realized that Alex, her so-called protector and confidant, had no true loyalty. Every promise he had made was a manipulation, designed to exploit her weakness and drive her to action. As the police began piecing together the timeline and digital evidence, Jennifer felt the walls of her carefully constructed reality crumble. The children, sensing the tension, began to withdraw emotionally. Ethan, once close to his mother, now confronted her subtly, questioning minor inconsistencies, asking why their father wasn't coming home. Lily's drawings began depicting figures in shadow, homes empty of warmth, and Noah's innocent play turned sullen, reflecting an atmosphere of unease. Jennifer's internal conflict reached its peak when she realized that the life she had chased through deceit and passion had evaporated into fear and isolation. The emotional weight of her actions bore down with an intensity that left her sleepless. She tried to call Alex, seeking reassurance, but he was evasive, careful not to involve himself directly as the investigation intensified. Detective Harper, meanwhile, methodically followed leads. Interviews with neighbors revealed fleeting observations, late-night visitors, unusual noises, and a figure seen leaving the house on the night of the murder. Every piece of information, however minor, built a web of suspicion. Harper knew that the perfect facade was hiding a fracture, and it was only a matter of time before the truth would emerge. Jennifer, aware of the tightening investigation, began making small mistakes. Messages sent in haste, a forgotten receipt, a careless comment to a neighbor, all began to form the outline of her culpability. Her perfect act was faltering, and the walls of deceit were closing in. The Reynolds house, once a picture of suburban bliss, now pulsed with a tension that seemed almost alive. Jennifer moved through her daily routine with the mechanical precision of someone performing a role, while inside, a storm of guilt, fear, and forbidden desire raged unchecked. Alex's visits became more frequent. He lingered at the doorway, offering comforting words, subtle touches, and jokes that drew hesitant laughter from Jennifer. It was intoxicating, a forbidden thrill that both excited and terrified her. She had never felt this way before, not even with Matthew. And yet, each laugh, each glance, deepened the chasm between her role as a devoted mother and wife and the dangerous attraction she felt toward Alex. The children noticed the shift. Ethan, the oldest, had always admired his mother, but now he watched her with a mix of confusion and growing suspicion. Lily sensed that something was off but couldn't name it, while Noah, too young to understand fully, seemed to pick up on the tension that now permeated the house. Every whispered conversation, every glance exchanged with Alex chipped away at the sense of security the children once felt. Jennifer found herself drawn to Alex in moments she could not resist. She began making excuses to see him, to speak with him privately, and to indulge in conversations that skirted the edges of intimacy. Each encounter left her both exhilarated and terrified, knowing that the path she was treading was dangerous, irreversible. One evening, as rain streaked down the windows of the Reynolds home, Alex leaned in close, his voice low and persuasive. "You know, Jennifer," he said, "you don't deserve to live a life of lies. Matthew never appreciated you. He never understood you. Together we could have everything, freedom, love, control. But first, he has to be removed from the equation." Jennifer's heart pounded. Fear collided with desire. The words were audacious, impossible, yet they planted a seed, a dangerous idea that had already been germinating in the shadowed corners of her mind. At the same time, Detective Harper intensified his investigation. Forensic reports indicated that the timeline of Matthew's death was inconsistent with Jennifer's account. Security footage revealed a shadowed figure entering and leaving the house at strange hours. Fingerprints and digital footprints began to paint a picture that no innocent explanation could justify. Harper began to focus more closely on Jennifer, noting the nervous gestures, the careful avoidance of certain topics, and the subtle inconsistencies in her statements. Jennifer's children began to mirror the tension in the household. Ethan withdrew into himself, his gaze sharp, questioning every interaction. Lily's drawings became darker, depicting houses shrouded in shadow, figures looming ominously, and family members divided by invisible walls. Noah's playful innocence was replaced with silent observation, his small face registering confusion and unease that no adult explanation could soothe. Meanwhile, Jennifer's relationship with Alex escalated subtly. Private texts, whispered phone calls, and secret meetings at odd hours created a clandestine bond that blurred moral boundaries. She rationalized her actions with twisted logic. Matthew had ignored her desires, stifled her freedom, and failed to understand her. Alex, in her mind, represented liberation, but one that demanded an unthinkable price. The night of the murder replayed in her mind with relentless clarity. Every detail, every choice, every moment of hesitation now seemed to point toward an inevitable conclusion. She had trusted Alex's manipulations, believing she was in control, yet control had slipped through her fingers the moment she took action. Detective Harper, piecing together evidence, began to suspect the involvement of another individual, someone who had influence over Jennifer. Neighborhood interviews revealed sightings of Alex near the Reynolds house on critical nights. Digital records, phone metadata, and a pattern of unusual transactions painted a network of deceit and collusion. Jennifer's inner turmoil grew. She oscillated between exhilaration and terror, realizing that each step deeper into Alex's world brought her closer to irreparable consequences. The guilt of her actions gnawed at her, especially when she looked into the eyes of her children. She saw in Ethan, Lily, and Noah's faces the reflection of the life she had shattered, the innocence she had betrayed. Alex, cunning and unfeeling, continued to manipulate her, ensuring she bore the full weight of suspicion while he remained hidden. "You'll be fine," he whispered during one clandestine meeting. "The world won't know a thing. Trust me." But Jennifer began to notice the cracks in his calm facade, the subtle evasions, the fleeting glances of someone calculating their own escape. As part 3 draws to a close, the house itself seems to hold its breath. Jennifer stands at the precipice of her choices, caught between desire and morality, love and destruction, freedom and damnation. The children sense the storm, the detectives close in on the truth, and the shadow of inevitable reckoning looms ever larger. The tension escalates. Who will be betrayed next? How far will Jennifer go to protect herself? And will the seductive pull of Alex ultimately lead to her downfall? The Reynolds household had changed forever. The once lively halls that echoed with laughter and playful banter were now silent, save for the occasional sobbing of children who didn't yet understand the depth of the tragedy. Matthew's absence was palpable in every corner. His favorite chair in the living room, the morning coffee routine, the way he used to ruffle Ethan's hair and tease Lily and Noah with playful antics. All gone, leaving a void filled with unease and suspicion. Detective Harper had intensified his investigation. Forensic teams meticulously analyzed the crime scene, uncovering subtle evidence overlooked in the initial chaos. A fragment of fabric beneath Matthew's fingernails suggested a struggle. A hidden camera in the hallway recorded shadows that didn't match Jennifer's movements. Phone metadata revealed clandestine late-night conversations with a young man, Alex. Slowly, the pieces began to fit together, pointing toward a carefully orchestrated plot that nobody had anticipated. Jennifer's guilt gnawed at her relentlessly. She tried to maintain the facade of normalcy, attending to the children, preparing meals, and answering calls with practiced calm. Yet at night, the memories replayed like a relentless storm. Every decision, every whisper from Alex, Every step she had taken toward murder now haunted her. In her dreams, Matthew's voice called out, accusing, disappointed, impossible to ignore. Alex, cunning and self-serving, continued to manipulate her from the shadows. "Relax," he would say in messages that made her pulse quicken and stomach churn simultaneously. "Everything will go as planned. Nobody will suspect you." But Jennifer's intuition told her otherwise. The excitement that once clouded her judgment began to twist into anxiety, fear, and doubt. She realized that the man she had trusted implicitly was planning to sacrifice her to save himself. The children were not blind to the change. Ethan, already perceptive for his age, noticed his mother's distracted demeanor, the anxious glances, and the whispered conversations. Lily, emotionally sensitive, felt the tension and began to withdraw into drawings that depicted shadowy figures and broken homes. Noah, young as he was, clung to Ethan, sensing a shift he could not yet articulate. The innocence of childhood had begun to crack, and Jennifer felt the weight of her actions reflected in her children's eyes, a mirror she could not bear to look at. As police interviews progressed, Jennifer's nervousness became increasingly apparent. She stumbled over details, misremembered timings, and grew defensive when asked about her late-night activities. Detective Harper's suspicion deepened. He noted patterns in her behavior, patterns that didn't align with grief or loss alone. Every small inconsistency added fuel to the fire of investigation. Meanwhile, Alex's true nature began to reveal itself. Messages that once reassured Jennifer now carried subtle threats. "You'll do what I say," one text read. "Don't forget, your freedom depends on me." The man who had promised love and escape had now positioned himself as her jailer, orchestrating a web of deceit that ensured Jennifer carried the blame entirely. Jennifer's emotions became a chaotic storm. She oscillated between fear, desire, regret, and desperation. She tried to pull away from Alex, but the threads of manipulation were strong, and the guilt of her actions tied her to him. She realized with chilling clarity that the man she had trusted had no intention of sharing any consequence, leaving her to face the aftermath alone. The neighborhood, once seemingly peaceful, had grown observant. Neighbors whispered about the Reynolds family, commenting on the absence of Matthew, the somber mood in the household, and the subtle changes in Jennifer's demeanor. Their curiosity added another layer of pressure, another mirror reflecting the unraveling of a woman who had once been the embodiment of perfection. One night, Jennifer broke down completely. She locked herself in her bedroom, weeping uncontrollably. The weight of her actions, the betrayal by Alex, and the inevitable consequences pressed down upon her chest like a physical force. She thought of her children, of the trust she had shattered, and of the father she had betrayed and murdered. There was no escape, no comfort, only the raw reality of her own choices. Detective Harper, piecing together digital evidence, eyewitness accounts, and forensic data, began to close in. The truth was no longer a distant theory, it was tangible, undeniable. He suspected Jennifer's involvement but also recognized the role of another actor, Alex, whose manipulations had guided her down the path of crime. As Part 4 concludes, Jennifer stands at the crossroads of reckoning. The walls of deception she had built crumble, the reality of her choices becomes inescapable, and the shadow of Alex looms both threateningly and deceptively over her future. Her children, who once adored her without question, begin to see the cracks in her morality, sensing betrayal and loss. The tension escalates to a fever pitch. Who will take responsibility? Will Jennifer find a way to confess, or will Alex manipulate his way to safety? And as the investigation unfolds, will justice finally prevail in a household shattered by ambition, desire, and betrayal? The sun had barely risen over New York's skyline when Detective Harper returned to the Reynolds residence, files in hand and a determined expression on his face. After weeks of painstaking investigation, analyzing digital records, financial trails, and forensic evidence, he had pieced together a story that was darker, more twisted, and more heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Jennifer sat in the living room, staring blankly at the wall, her children quietly playing nearby. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the kind that presses down on your chest, making every breath heavy. She sensed it before he even spoke, the look in Detective Harper's eyes, the quiet authority in his voice. "Jennifer Reynolds," he began slowly, "we have evidence regarding Matthew's death, and it doesn't suggest suicide. It's murder." Jennifer's stomach dropped. Her hands trembled, and she gripped the edge of the sofa as if holding onto it would keep her from collapsing. She had rehearsed explanations in her mind countless times, but now, faced with the inevitability of truth, words failed her. The detective continued, detailing how late-night phone calls between Jennifer and Alex, the neighboring young man, had coincided with suspicious activity in the house. The hidden camera footage, the fabric under Matthew's fingernails, and even Alex's financial manipulation all painted a chilling picture. Slowly, piece by piece, the crime that had seemed so carefully hidden came into full view. Jennifer's mind raced back to that night. The way Alex had whispered promises, the intoxicating mix of fear and desire, the twisted justification that had led her to commit the unthinkable. She remembered the moment she had struck, the look of confusion and pain in Matthew's eyes, and how her own hands had betrayed her morality. But then, like a dagger to her heart, she realized Alex's betrayal. The man who had promised to share everything, who had convinced her to act, had positioned himself as untouchable. He had subtly guided the investigation away from himself, leaving Jennifer to carry the entire burden. The detective revealed Alex's messages, full of manipulation and coercion. "You'll do this or everything you've built will crumble," one read. Another, "Don't worry. I'll take care of the rest." Each text was a piece of evidence proving not only premeditation but deliberate exploitation. Jennifer's knees buckled. She sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, her body shaking with the weight of guilt, fear, and the knowledge that there was no escape. She had been both perpetrator and victim, deceived by someone she had trusted implicitly. The children, sensing the turmoil, gathered around her. Ethan's eyes, usually bright and full of mischief, were clouded with confusion and hurt. Lily clung to Jennifer, whispering questions she didn't have answers for. Noah's small hands pressed against his mother's chest, searching for comfort that was no longer simple to give. Detective Harper allowed a moment, recognizing the profound human tragedy, before continuing. "Jennifer, you need to come with us. The evidence is clear and we have enough to proceed with an arrest." Jennifer's lips trembled as she tried to speak. I didn't mean Her voice broke, drowned in tears. The truth of her actions, the irreversibility of the murder, and the crushing realization of Alex's betrayal overwhelmed her completely. Meanwhile, Alex's role was scrutinized. Through digital tracking and witness testimony, it became clear that he had orchestrated the events to protect himself while ensuring Jennifer would take the fall. The man who had once charmed Jennifer had turned out to be a master manipulator, using love and desire as weapons to achieve his own ends. The courtroom proceedings were intense. Jennifer's confession, her tearful recounting of the manipulation, and the evidence against Alex painted a portrait of tragedy and deceit that shocked the community. Her children, forced to witness the unraveling of their family, were left grappling with emotions far beyond their years: grief, anger, betrayal, and confusion. In the end, Jennifer was arrested. Her apologies, sobbing pleas for forgiveness, and promises of change were met with cold legal reality. Justice at last had found its course, but the emotional scars remained. Her children's trust shattered, their innocence lost, and a once happy family reduced to memory and sorrow. The neighborhood, once envious of the Reynolds family's seemingly perfect life, now whispered not in admiration but in disbelief. The story served as a stark reminder. Appearances can deceive, love can be manipulated, and even the most perfect households can conceal dark secrets. Jennifer's life behind bars began as a daily confrontation with guilt, regret, and sorrow. Alex, shielded by cunning and distance, faced minimal consequences compared to the chaos he had instigated. The children, under the care of relatives and counselors, slowly started to rebuild, though the shadow of loss would follow them indefinitely. As the sun set over New York, the Reynolds home stood quiet once more. Yet the echoes of betrayal, deception, and murder lingered, a haunting testament to human frailty, temptation, and the devastating consequences of choices made in the blind pursuit of desire. This story of love, lust, betrayal, and murder would be remembered not just for the crime itself, but for the emotional and psychological depths it revealed, how one act of deceit could ripple through a family, a community, and an entire life. Jennifer's life had turned into an endless cycle of guilt, regret, and self-recrimination. Every morning she woke up with the crushing weight of what she had done. She could not escape the memory of her husband's death, nor the consequences of the choices that had led her here. Each day she punished herself silently, whispering curses and apologies into the empty walls of her home. She would pound her head against the walls, scream into the dark, and cry herself to sleep, haunted by the betrayal she had committed, not only against her husband but also against herself and the family she had once loved. The memories of the neighbor she had been infatuated with, the man who had persuaded her to commit the unthinkable, tormented her mind endlessly. He had used her, manipulated her, and then abandoned all responsibility, leaving her alone to face the consequences. Her mind became a labyrinth of pain and paranoia. She questioned everything, her desires, her morality, even her very existence. The love she had once felt had transformed into self-loathing, and the life she had built for her children now seemed like a cruel joke. Every laugh she remembered from her family's happier days twisted painfully into a reminder of her sins. Jennifer's mental state deteriorated rapidly. She could no longer distinguish reality from her relentless, guilt-driven hallucinations. The authorities, after seeing her complete collapse, decided that she was a danger to herself. She was admitted to a psychiatric institution, where she spent the rest of her days confined to a life of isolation and despair. Even there, in the sterile halls of the institution, her mind never rested. She wept for what she had done, for the love she had destroyed, and for the family she had torn apart. There were no visitors, no forgiveness, no redemption, only the echoes of her guilt, day and night. Eventually, Jennifer's life ended quietly within the walls of the asylum, a tragic conclusion to a chain of events fueled by desire, deceit, and the devastating consequences of betrayal. Her story, though filled with sorrow and horror, serves as a chilling reminder. The choices we make, the passions we surrender to, and the lies we act upon can alter lives forever. And sometimes, justice and retribution arrive in forms far harsher than we ever imagined.